Yeah, as Sherry was saying, I'm Richard Gower. I've been in software development since '84, writing code, managing design teams, doing product development, product management, kind of basically doing everything from beginning to end in the software development lifecycle. I've worked for some very, very large companies: British Rail, EDS, HP, and WebTech. They're all a couple of those were 100,000 employees. And we were doing a lot of waterfall and project management. And then some smaller companies, Catapult, EJ Ward's a local San Antonio company. Geo Sullivan is a consultancy that was, we were doing software development. Right now, I'm working for a very small company. I'm working with my brother-in-law and my son, who's actually on this call. He's obviously on here to keep an eye on me as well. So we've got about 5 people. So kind of run the gamut on different types of projects. The goal today is kind of just to talk a little bit about Agile software development process. When I was asked to kind of give an introduction to Agile, what is Agile, or how does one act in an Agile manner? It's like, you know, if you ask 100 Agilists, you're going to get 100 different answers. And any one little topic can be taken and discussed in great detail. There are Agile groups that meet every week to discuss different, holding meetings, doing planning, and just there is so much to talk about. So what I thought I'd do, and I try and piece together a little bit of history and try and weave it all together, and we'll just look at how it became more formal as the Agile software development in the early 2000s. So we'll go to a little bit of history. We'll talk about the Agile Manifesto, which kind of drives a lot of the software development processes. And then we can break down what it takes to be Agile. If we've got time, we can talk about some of the Agile myths, and then we'll kind of wrap it all up together. If you got questions, I'm sure post them in the Slack, and I'm sure Sherry or someone will get them to me. So
yeah, if they can do it in the meeting chat, that's where we're gonna do that.
Okay, that'd be great. So Agile kind of started in the software development industry, but it's now relevant across all parts of the business. And in fact, whole companies believe that they're acting in an Agile manner. So first off, let's look at project management and process improvement methodologies. Kind of look at the construction industry. It's a very phased approach. Construction was, you make a mistake when you're building something, it can be catastrophic, and you can't undo very easily. So it's always been a very phased approach, and you can go back to the pyramids of Giza with some of the project management processes. And critical path analysis and Gantt charts were actually coming around in the early 1900s. But basic project management and the PMI kind of got very much more formalized in the 1950s. And that's when the formal discipline, and actually PMI formed around the 60s. And then the PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge, was kind of published at soon before the 2000. So the construction, this whole process of going kind of like initiating and planning, design, construction, a very formal process, and making sure that you don't make mistakes and everyone's on board and schedule everything. That's obviously very, very critical on these projects. Now another thing to look at is lean manufacturing. This is more process improvement, but there was a lot of work. Lean manufacturing was kind of in the 50s. It was kind of looking at how do we improve our processes. So it all kind of geared around eliminating waste. And the idea of delivering value to your customer, decreasing the resources used, decreasing the time to develop. This kind of started with the Toyota way and has led into kind of lean software. And actually, a lot of it is very keen to the Agile methodology. And then the software, the Waterfall. We all talk about Waterfall because there's a very distinguished type of phases that were done. Requirements, and then you looked at the requirements, you gathered them, you wrote them up in a document, you passed that on to the team then designed the software and the database and everything. You pass that over to the construction or the implementation team. They would write the code, pass it over to a testing team who would test it, and then you pass it on to the maintenance team. So continuous distinct chunks of work that had to have clear sign-offs. Oops, let me go back. When I was working at EDS, we would have these, and we would have to produce massive amounts of documentation to support this. A lot of times, we'd argue that the documentation didn't make sense, it wasn't needed, but it was like, no, the process says you have to do the documentation, so the documentation had to be done. This is a great process if you've got a project with high levels of certainty and very little change going on. So when you know, if you know what your requirements up front are and they're not going to change, then that works real well. The waterfall terminology basically came in the 70s, 80s. And the Department of Defense, they made it their software development process around about the 90s. And then the software development. So software development started realizing that this wasn't necessarily the best way of creating software projects and products. The long life cycle from idea to implementation often meant that the software didn't fit the original need, or the original need had changed. There was a lack of flexibility. Now you did have change management, but it was a whole process. So if you had to change your requirements, you would have to go all the way back, get it approved, and you change the documentation and kind of flow back down the waterfall. A lot of people were seeing that this was problematic, and they wanted to focus on the key aspects of collaboration, flexibility, customer satisfaction, iterative and incremental development. The whole goal was to start providing value to the customer as quickly as possible. People started coming up with new methodologies. You'll recognize some of them: Scrum, extreme programming, the feature-driven development, crystal clear dynamic systems development method. These all came around 1990s, early 2000s. Kanban in the 2000s came about as a visual way of doing software development. And then, as with everything else, with all these different methodologies, the designers, the inventors started monetizing these methodologies, and you started getting certifications, you started getting books written, and then consultants, selling the methodologies. And it's not like any of the methodologies were wrong; they were all very, very good, and they all worked if you kind of followed them too. But this was causing a problem. We were getting more and more methodologies, and here's a slide of 30, 40 different agile methods and frameworks that are out there. And so these methodologies were kind of proliferating and getting crazy and hard to follow. And so this provided some challenges that in the software industry, and people started looking at how these project management methodologies were not addressing the software development projects. Mostly software development is more complex and it's unpredictable. Usually people don't know, and if you've been working in design, you'll know this as well. People really don't know what they want until they start seeing it. And it's very difficult sometimes to kind of build exactly what they want And so there's a lot of changes needed once you have actually started building it. And then with the different methodologies and the frameworks came a lot of chaos and confusion. And the goal is obviously to try to be customer focused, outcome driven, worry about more the what you're building and the product and the results that are happening. Obviously, everyone wants to be faster to market, but you want to be faster to market, but you also want to add value to market. It's no good providing something quickly to the market if it doesn't give value. The goal always with better collaboration and teamwork. And we talked about a lot of changes coming in, so being flexible and adapting your processes and your tools to changes as they came. And what happened was a group of people, software developers, these are the 17 the names, and if you're worked in software development, you'll recognize a number of these names. A lot of them are still around with methodologies. They're all respected names in the industry. The founders of Scrum and different methodologies that are out there, the crystal clear, the pragmatic programming. And so they got together. They decided to spend a few days up in the largest snowboard ski resort in Utah. And what they wanted was to kind of discuss finding something that might work to give a better methodology towards software development, and as a counteraction to the waterfall methodology. And what was most strange about it was these 17 different people with different viewpoints, different ideas, they actually did come up with an agreement. And they called it the Agile Manifesto. Its full term was the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. And that's kind of what we'll be talking about mostly for the rest of this talk. So what is this Agile Manifesto? At the end of the 3 days, they basically had come up with a core set of values and principles for software development. And they all agreed with them and signed them off and said, yes, these are the principles and the values that we think should guide software development. So it's not the methodology, it's not a predictable method of doing stuff. It's more a philosophy for looking at and making decisions to change your processes and result in a more agile approach to software development. And the key thing here is it's a foundation for teams to make decisions that result in better software. So when we go through, we'll go through the values and the principles, and then using those, you make decisions as to what processes and how should I operate as an individual and as a team to satisfy my customers' needs. And then this was geared around software because they were all software development, but a lot of the principles can be taken and adapted for other industries. And there are stresses over this. There's the collaboration over documentation, self-organization rather than rigid management practices, and an ability to manage change rather than being locked into a rigid development process. So this was kind of what the Agile Manifesto kind of gears at. So we'll start looking at the first value. And they were saying, they started off by going, we're uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. And then through this work, we have come to value, and individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So although they see value on the right, processes and tools, we value the items on the left, the individuals and interactions, more. So sometimes this gets people confused. They think, oh, that means we don't need to worry about processes and tools or the things that are on the right side for these values. But that's not the case. the tools and processes are very important. However, it is much more important to have competent people working together. The tools and processes will help individuals collaborate. The second value is working software over comprehensive documentation. Again, that does not mean that there is no documentation, but the main goal of the development of software is to create that software. So if the documentation is helpful to create software, then we should write documentation. However, it should be minimal but sufficient to the project. And this is one of the key things that comes up also in the later, where working software is the critical measure of success. Third value, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Now, yes, contract negotiations are important, business dealings, pricing, and everything. However, it's much more valuable to have developers and customers working together to produce the right product for the need that the customer has, as opposed to getting stuck on the details of the contract. And in fact, the better way is to include in the contract that there's close collaboration. So it's always about, working closely with the customer. And then the fourth and last value they have, responding to change over following a plan. Doesn't mean say there isn't a plan. Plans are very important. And in fact, you'll see in a lot of the methodologies, the Agile methodologies, there's a lot of planning. But the plan can't be so rigid that you can't allow a change in the requirements or the scope, the technology, the business priorities. Things change over time. There's no point building a product for a customer if the business need no longer is there. And we find that we are always planning. We talk about doing iterative sprints. There's a plan right at the beginning of the sprint. And then every day, as we see changes or we have to make different decisions, we plan. So the important thing is being able to pivot as we learn more as we get into the project. And we must be ready to deviate from the plan whenever is necessary based on the circumstances that are happening outside necessarily of our control or by the business or by the industry. So on top of these four core values, there are 12 Agile principles. And just to be clear, these aren't rules for practicing Agile. They're not written down and said, you must do it this way. They basically underpin the software development approach. And by looking at them, again, it helps you make decisions as you go and you come across, how should I act? How should our processes work? And we're always looking at, collaboration, flexibility, and continuous improvement. And you'll see there these 12 principles. First principle, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So this is about keeping the customer happy. We want to ship early. We want to iterate frequently. We want to listen to the market. What does the market need? We don't want to just give wait 6 months and then give them something and say, I hope this is what you want. We want to get them something early and get feedback to see, is this what you want? And it may change the direction of what we were planning on building next. You may find that, halfway through the project, you have built 90% of the value. There is no need to build any more of the product. It's important. This principle kind of leads to getting it into the hands of the customer as soon as possible, minimizing the time between having the idea and launching a product. That doesn't mean that the product is completed early. It does mean that valuable pieces of the functionality are delivered early. A big thing with Agile is this rapid experimentation. Let's do something. Let's get 100% of something done and get it out there and see how the market reacts. Let's see if it's working. Now, this may not work for every single type of software that you're developing, but a lot of the software, websites and marketing and things that we're building, this is very appropriate. Another part this kind of ties in with is starting simple. You can add complexity later. You don't have to build complexity in right at the beginning. We can add it as we go. Second principle is welcoming change. There was, in the waterfall method, there were change management processes. But a lot of the time it's like, oh, okay, if we have a change, we've all got to stop working and then we got to address it. The idea is to accept that there's going to be changes and even welcome these changes. Usually the change comes because it's going to make the product more valuable than it was going to be. It's important to take these changes and allow the customer to be have an advantage in the marketplace. It's important also, as when you're building software, to build this software with assumptions that changes are going to happen. So there are ways that you can kind of build your software knowing that I'm going to have changes. And you know, if you plan ahead, then you can add these changes in later more smoothly. Deliver working software frequently, and we talked about that in the values. So often, if you have a look at methodologies such as Scrum, you have an iteration of a couple of weeks, and then there's some product is delivered at the end of the 2-week period. What you want to do is break down the product into smaller components or features, and then ship these features frequently. This does provide you the opportunity to validate the product, the ideas, the strategies, and you can then make changes and you know, correct your path that you're going. Principle number 4: business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. The preferred manner is to have an embedded customer in the team, so the business person could be embedded within the team, or is at least very accessible to the team. We used to work when back in the Waterfall days, there was a whole department of business analysts, and they were the only ones that were allowed to talk to the customer. And so the possibility of mistakes, misunderstandings being passed between customer and developer and back from developer to customer are huge. One of the benefits of having the business people close to the developers is the developer can probably get a better understanding of what is of value to the customer. As a developer myself, you sit there and you go, okay, this is going to be cool. Let's build this. I know they're going to love this. And you might find the customer goes, I don't have any need for that. That won't help at all. What would be better is to find that out before you start building it and you developed it. The other part is what can be left out. Maybe the customer can say, hey, we can ignore these things. So it's very important to kind of have them working closely together. And you know, from the this Agile Manifesto, they're saying working together daily on these through the project. Number 5, build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. So we want to build teams around competent individuals, motivated individuals, people that will get the work done if given the responsibility and the authority. So it's important to give the team support. And that's coming from the management side and the business. Is saying, okay, we trust you guys to build this. Trust is a very big part behind the thoughts of the Agile movement. The principle 6, most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. I think we all know that. We've managed to get by, and with COVID over the last few years, being able to do Slack and Zoom meetings. But as you all know, being able to see someone and pick up those social cues, understanding who might be struggling by or may not be totally understanding. A lot is lost through emails and texts and Slack, but actually having face-to-face meetings is often a lot more invigorating for the team. And typically you get better collaboration. Often they would want, the ideal obviously is to have the team all co-located at the same location. Working software is the primary measure of progress, and we talked a little bit about this. The end goal is to have working software that provides value to the customer. Closing tickets, finishing tasks, meeting deadlines are all great, but it still comes back to the fact that it's the working software, working valuable software is what you're trying to accomplish. And so it's like focus on delivering it, deliver working and useful software. It is important to focus on the software that you're building over the completing of tasks. And again, basically what you're doing is prioritizing the needs of the customer above all other objectives. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. This obviously is talking about wanting a way of working that can be sustained. It's important not to overwork, ridiculous hours to try to meet deadlines, causing burnout, low morale. And it's a matter of balancing productivity with sustainability. Number 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. So it's higher standards of technical excellence and good design practices support the delivery of high quality software. We want to deliver high quality software. We don't want to have to keep fixing software. Anything that we have to go and redo will obviously slow us down, but it also causes you a loss of customers. If you have bugs and problems with the software, you could be losing your customer base. Behind some of this is things like don't make the decisions too early. If you can push off making a decision, wait until you have to make that decision. When you've got better information and you know the details more. And also, Agile really promotes the use of automated technologies where possible. So if you can automate testing, if you can automate deployment, if you can set up an automated system for a continuous deployment, you can change and enhance your delivery of value to the customer tenfold, hundredfold. Simplicity. Principle 10, art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. So don't make the product too complicated to start with. I mean, make it as complicated as it needs to be, but you want to get feedback as soon as possible. You don't want to make it complicated and then find you've got to change it because it's wrong, and that just adds a lot more development time. It's important to try and start the product simply and evolve it. Obviously, the work that you don't have to do is always saving time. And some of this obviously comes from a lot of the lean principles we're talking about. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Empower the teams. The teams need to be self-organized. They need to figure out who's going to do what. They want to be able to solve the problems and make the decisions. This improves the morale of the team and makes them a lot more quicker functioning and responding to changes and problems than having to always go back and get direction from the business. And 12th is, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So if anyone's familiar with Scrum, there's a reflection at the end, and you use the reflection to look at what the process has been and how you can improve it. So this is all about continuous improvement of the team and their processes. You reflect on the process and the way that you're working. And then you make adjustments. If you see there's opportunities, you make these adjustments. Or you run an experiment. Often we call this running an experiment and see if the effectiveness has improved. So you might find you've got an issue in some part of the development process. Plan an experiment, make the change, see if it improved. If it improved, then keep it. If it didn't improve, change it again. In some ways, if nothing changes in your process, you're not really following this principle. You're not truly agile. You would expect that there are always some kind of tweaks that you can do. And just a guideline with this, don't look at doing a whole load of changes at one time. It's typically better to kind of look at one thing that can be improved, tweak it, and then see the effect. If you suddenly make 5 or 6 changes and say, okay, we got to change everything we're doing, and then next week comes by and you find out you know better, and you're not sure which ones worked or didn't work and which one made it worse. So that's basically these are the principles behind the Agile Manifesto. So kind of putting some of this together, long list of things on how to act in an agile manner. Custom and developers work together. Cross-functional teams. Don't silo the teams. Try to get the right functional team together for the project. And so you would have developers and testers and designers all working as a single team. Efficient and face-to-face communication. So if you can't have face-to-face communication, look at getting the tools to assist with that. Everyone needs to be open to change. Breaking the work into smaller pieces and components. Develop iteratively. So kind of work on something, get it done, and then work on something else. Get that done, finish it. Deliver value frequently. Give product, give features to the customer frequently. Fail often and early. Often it sounds bad to fail, but if you're going to fail, it would be good to do it as soon as possible. Find out what works and what doesn't work. And then obviously fix it. Reflect and make experimental changes as necessary to improve your processes. A short feedback loop. So don't wait a long time to realize that something's not working. So that kind of ties in with the fail often and early. You want to find out what needs to be changed. And that could be your processes. It could be the software that's being developed based on the business needs. And then do as much or as little documentation as is necessary. Again, it all depends on your context. So looking at being agile is not the end goal. It's the engine to get to your goal. The real goal is to deliver value to the customer through the use of the software. And the agile techniques will help you do that. It helps the development teams achieve their objectives. So it's really important going through the decision-making process. to decide on what your processes are. Your situation, your team situation is unique. One of the problems is looking at another company and say, well, they do X and they're successful, so we should do X. So, you know, seeing what Google does or Microsoft does or Amazon, well, their situation may be vastly different from yours. And what works for them may not work for your company. And mimicking another team's actions and processes won't make you agile. So even within teams within your own company, what's working for one of the teams may not work for your team. A good agile team will change and refine the practices they use. So that kind of comes back to this decision-making process. You define your practice, your agile processes, and to make you the best team that you can be. Now, the existing methodologies and frameworks, Scrum, Kanban, you saw the list of, you know, dozens and dozens of them. They're a great place to start, and they give you a starting place. So if you're inexperienced with an agile methodology, then that's a great place to start. However, it doesn't mean that that will always change, stay the same. It will change, and it should change. Respond to change and deal with uncertainty. This is how we need to look at everything today. We talked about automating the processes. That is one way that will make you very efficient. Embrace failure as an opportunity for improvement. So when something doesn't work, don't see it as necessarily a bad thing. Use it as a learning opportunity and improve going forward. And basically, you know, develop a product rather than a project mindset. A lot of times we look at, oh, I'm in this project and I gotta, you know, see the project. I'm trying to complete the project. We should be looking at the product. What is the outcome? What is we delivering at the end? And that's the important part of it. I think, yes, so we can actually talk a little bit about the agile myths. I think we've got time. Hey, you can find hundreds of myths and stuff on the web. Agile is methodology. It isn't. You know, it's not a methodology. It's not a process. It's not a framework. As we saw, it's some core values and principles. It's a way of making decisions. Agile is chaotic. It's not. They're actually, you know, sound principles. And you have a look at the values and principles behind it all, and they come from a lot of years of development and proving that they work. These four go together basically. There's no planning in agile projects. There are no deadlines. There's no documentation. There's no testing. That's not true at all. As we talked about planning in an agile project, there's planning all the time. If you're planning right before a sprint, before an iteration of development, within the iteration, you are planning. As you find changes, you make plans. It's continuous planning. You find that you're actually doing planning during the construction phase, whereas if you had a look at the Waterfall methodology, you did all the planning up front, and then you kind of did a lot less planning later on. There are no deadlines. That's an interesting one. There are, especially if you're doing the iterations, if you're doing, say, a 2-week iteration, you're going to deliver something in 2 weeks. One of the biggest problems that we always had with software development was knowing how to predict what it's going to take to build a certain piece of software or some features. Estimating in software is, I hate to say it, is very, very hard because you're not usually building the same thing over and over again. When you're building the same software over and over again, you can predict very, very precisely. So it gets very tough to say this is how long it's going to take. So kind of turn it around and say, okay, let's try and put features out, and we'll try every couple of weeks, we'll try and put some features out. Documentation, we talked about that. there is documentation, you do sufficient documentation. We don't want to create documents that will just sit on the shelf that no one will read. I've done plenty of that. I worked on projects where at the end of the project, we hadn't done certain documentation because it wasn't needed. And my manager told me, go write those documents. And it's like I spent 2 weeks writing documents just so we could check off the box to say, we've created documents, those documents, we've followed the process right. But obviously they were done at the end of the project. And so it served no purpose in the creation of the product. No testing, there's testing all the time. And actually individuals are testing, and the testers within the team should be testing. And if you're doing continuous deployment, you have probably automated your testing as well. So there's an awful lot of testing going on in Agile projects. Agile is only for software development. It kind of started out for software development, but most of the principles and the core values you can take and you can apply it to other endeavors, and has been applied to business, to HR, to finance. Obviously, the core values and the principles would change a little bit because some of them talk about working software, they wouldn't be applicable, but the ideas behind them are totally relevant to development, to other methodologies and other businesses. Agile is synonymous with Scrum. So Agile is Scrum, Scrum is Agile. I was actually reading an article that was talking about that today. And no, Scrum is more of a methodology that uses some of the Agile approaches. It has a number of ceremonies and dictates kind of how to do certain things and when to do them. Agile is only for small teams. There are methodologies that are geared around the Agile framework, the Agile processes that are designed to scale for very, very large companies. And, you know, the entire company would be running in an Agile manner. Agile is a silver bullet. Well, Agile is not going to solve everything. It can help when applied properly to developing good software or reducing waste, providing value to the customer, and that's what is most important at the end. Now, the last myth I got here is to be Agile, one must first in certain methods, procedures, ceremonies, or events. This is terminology from things like Scrum. So you do a number of things like the daily sprint, daily Scrum is a stand-up meeting for 15 minutes, and it's meant to be at a fixed time. That is a ceremony as part of the Scrum methodology. You don't need to do that to be Agile. If you want to be following Scrum, then you need to be doing that. What we find with myself, we're in such a small company. There's 2 software developers, and we're both on this this presentation right now. Obviously, you know, the Scrum makes sense. Do a lot of the methodologies make sense? They don't. So we've taken a lot of the processes and adapted them to how we see fit. So we will sit down there and we'll figure out a couple of features that we want to build, and then we'll focus on an iteration of developing that. We chat all the time. Do we have a stand-up? Don't need to have a stand-up. We're on there's 2 of us and we're on chat all the time. So we can be very agile without doing a lot of these procedures. And so really a wrap up, just to try to put it all in place. What is Agile? It's a set of values and principles. It's a foundation for making decisions, and it's a focus on the people doing the work. And we talked about the values that people come first, adaptation, early and frequent value delivery, and customer collaboration. And the principles are tied around the people, the work, and the continuous improvement. We've got customers, collaboration, self-organizing, functional, cross-functional teams, face-to-face conversations, sustainable development, trust, and support. Attention to technical excellence, frequent deliverables, working software simplicity, and then, the continuous improvement with reflecting and adjusting. So again, it comes back to it. It's like these are giving us ideas of how to make decisions as to how we work. How is our way of work in an agile context? And so my message is use the appropriate practices for your context. Your company is different to my company, is different to everyone else's company. Not everything is applicable. Just because it works for someone and they're very, very successful doesn't mean that's necessarily going to work for you. Don't be afraid to try things. We've done that. We've tried some things that work and some things don't. We'll suddenly read about different methodology, and okay, we can steal some ideas from that. When I did as a project manager, I was always kind of tweaking and changing the typical waterfall process to make it work better for myself. Obviously, if you're working with a company that dictates this is the procedures you're going to follow, then you don't have that kind of luxury, maybe. And that's basically everything that I have. So if you've got any questions, I don't know, Sherry, if you want to bring any questions.
Well, thanks so much for that. It was such a great refresher on what I've been working through in companies for the last couple of years. But we do have one question, and it's from Beatrix, and she said that she is wondering if there are any specific metrics that you can focus on in Agile.
Well, as I was saying, because Agile is really, these core values and principles, it's hard to talk about metrics per se, but you're looking at trying to deliver value to the customer. So that's, now, is that easy to measure? No, it's not easy to measure, but that's what you want him to look at. Are we giving value? It's like you could suddenly say, oh, I don't know if you understand, software development, people will have user stories, and then they'll size user stories by t-shirt sizes or by Fibonacci sequence or something, and they'll go, oh, look, that's an 8-point story. And then at the end of the iteration, they go, oh, look, we did 16 points worth of work. Okay, but did the customer get any value from that 16 points of work?
Right.
And yes, that's really hard to do. It's almost like it's hard to be quantitative, but it's very easy to be qualitative, maybe. You've got your user surveys. You're a researcher, Sherry. How do you tell if customers are ecstatic with a website, or how are they? How can you tell when they're more pleased than less pleased, right?
Right. Well, and I like that, Agile is just it's a framework that you're using to work with other people. And like you said, if it's not bringing value, but the whole thing is that you're able to keep the customer informed along the way. And that's the framework of it, is if you're able to keep the customer informed along the way, you can get immediate feedback and adjust and change, and you're flexible that way. And so if you're able to make changes to make them happy, then it's working. Right?
It may not be necessary to have those metrics per se. Now, are your bosses going to like that?
Yeah.
No, well, managers like metrics.
And that's the whole thing, is why they have ceremonies, like you said, there's a lot of planning, there's daily check-ins, and there's a retrospective at the end of each sprint to see what worked and what didn't. And that's where you're finding out your metrics, basically, is like, this is not working for me, so we need to change this. And it's not a count thing, like you can't count things or whatever, but it's how flexible things are.
But remember, so having the reflection at the end of the sprint is very much a Scrum methodology. So remember, Agile didn't tell you that you had to do it at the end of an iteration. It just said frequently, right?
Right.
So you could be doing.
And I've been in some that are 2 weeks, 4 weeks. Some, you know, it just depends.
You know, the better thing is, you know, especially with the reflection, is if you see a problem, bring it up and then address it right now. So like you're saying, yes, let's talk to the customer or talk to the developers or talk to the person, talk to the teams or whatever, and work out problems sooner as opposed to waiting and say, okay, in 6 months, we'll talk about it. Like, no, get it out on the table and fix it. But yeah, metrics is, you can get a load of talks on metrics.
Yeah, you can look at they go by our velocity and how many points we're able to do in each sprint and things like that. But that doesn't, like you said, it doesn't give you the value. We can knock out all kinds of work, but if it's not to the right,
a lot of people are moving away from velocity, and people, it's so funny. You have a look at Scrum. I mean, at one point, you know, you just burn down chart, and now people are going, who cares? You know, it's like it doesn't help you. So it's like, you know.
So Beatrix, there's the answer to that is there's not a hard metrics, but if you're communicating with your team on a regular basis and you're flexible, that's how you know it's working. We have another question. What about the classic scope creep, and how is that avoided down the road in Agile planning?
Well, let's change the aspect. If the features are of value to the customer, is it really scope creep? Right? So if the customer is suddenly saying, hey, I need this, and hopefully, you know, you're all sitting there going, it's valuable. So this will get us more money. This will get us more clicks, conversions, whatever you want to call it. Then why wouldn't you want to do it? Right? The key point is, are we just adding features for feature's sake? So do the developers suddenly go, you know what? Why don't we add this and this and this and this and this? And everyone's just throwing it in. You do need some idea of, is there value? And again, you know, that's where the interaction of the customer coming in and saying, this is what is of value to us. And then getting it out there and seeing, is there value? Because if you find there isn't value, then maybe, you know, some of the other things that are in the list also don't have value. You might be able to, you know, interpolate from that information. So
thanks, Richard. Hi, this is Nicole. That really helps understand a bit better. I was thinking more on the side of, for example, the sponsor or the client, you know, adding features on top of features or requests on top of requests, and, you know, how is that managed, and who will actually, you know, sort of put a bit of a stop to it, a slight stop or slow down, let's say, to all the requests in order to either prioritize them or give a feedback on, you know, this is not doable, or this is useless, this doesn't bring value, and so forth.
Well, typically within the Scrum methodology, you do have the product owner who is basically kind of responsible for looking at the different features and trying to prioritize the features. And then, you know, some things will probably not make the cut based on that. Now, if the customer is willing to keep adding features and keep paying for you to have the features, then it's really hard to tell them to, you know, stop giving you more features, right? But I do get your point. If you get inundated with way too much, then that could, you know, just blanket you and not allow you to get anything done.
Right.
The key piece is to break it into small sections and find where the most value is and get those done. It does rely on good cooperation between the customer and the team and talking through some of these things.
Yeah. And sometimes, just to add to that, sometimes you have a scope document that tells you what's in scope and what's out of scope. And if it's out of scope, then, that's usually above our pay grade, the decision makers who can say, we can fit that in, or let me talk to the team and see how much of an impact that is on our timeline and our, in the money or the contract or whatever, or other features that we've already put in. So that's up to them to kind of negotiate that and work it into where it feels the most comfortable. And that's one thing I love about Scrum. I mean, not Scrum, but Agile, is that everybody works together as a team. Nobody is in charge of each other. Nobody tells them just get to work, get that done. None of that. Agile takes all that away. There's no hierarchy. Everybody works together and problem solves and collaborates. And that's what that framework is for. It's, get rid of the hierarchy and the who's the boss and who tells what to do. Everybody is helping each other figure out the problems. And if it's, going to be an impact to the project, then you go back to the customer and they say, look, this is going to take an extra, month, or it's going to add 3 months to your project. Are you willing to do that? That sort of thing. So it's just a lot of communication. So
yeah, and it depends on your business model too, because if you're a software developer building software for an external customer, that's a different case than in your case, Sherry, where your customer is part of HEB still, right? It's another department or another, part of the company.
Right. And sometimes you're working on a budget, and sometimes you're working on timeline, and sometimes you're always trying to balance all three, right? Quality. Yeah. If you're going to get you want it good, cheap, and fast.